Eritrea celebrates independence as president. Isaias accuses Ethiopia of destabilization. US sanctions Sudan over chemical weapons. Use Eritrea marked its 34th Independence Day on May 24, 2025, with nationwide celebrations commemorating the country's hard-won liberation from Ethiopia in 1991. During a keynote address, President Isaias Afwerki used the occasion to issue a strong warning to neighboring Ethiopia, accusing it of preparing for conflict under misguided and outdated ambitions. He asserted that Eritrea remains ready to defend its sovereignty, but emphasized that his country has no intention of interfering in Ethiopia's internal affairs. President Afwerki also called on the international community to hold Ethiopia accountable for regional destabilization. Meanwhile, in a separate development, the United States has imposed new sanctions on Sudan, citing the confirmed use of chemical weapons by government forces during clashes with the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces in 2024. According to the U.S. State Department, chlorine gas was among the agents reportedly deployed. The sanctions include bans on U.S. exports and credit lines to Sudan. Khartoum has yet to respond to the accusations. These twin developments underscore rising tensions in the Horn of Africa and growing international scrutiny over state conduct in ongoing regional conflicts. Meanwhile, U.S. accuses Sudan of using chemical weapons, imposes sanctions. The United States has formally accused the Sudanese government of using chemical weapons during its ongoing conflict with the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF. In response, Washington has imposed a new wave of sanctions targeting Sudan's access to U.S. exports and financial credit lines. The measures are set to take effect in early June 2025. According to U.S. officials, chlorine gas was among the chemical agents reportedly deployed during military operations in 2024. While exact details remain classified, the State Department said the evidence warranted immediate action under international law. Sudanese authorities have not issued an official response, but some diplomatic voices have criticized the U.S. for bypassing the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, OPCW, in pursuing independent findings. The sanctions follow a pattern of mounting international concern over the conduct of Sudanese forces, with previous U.S. actions already targeting individuals for alleged war crimes and human rights violations. The move underscores escalating international pressure on Sudan's military-led government amid an increasingly deadly and prolonged civil conflict. Now let us focus on Congo. Former DRC President Joseph Kabila faces treason charges after Senate strips immunity. In a major political development in the Democratic Republic of Congo, former President Joseph Kabila is now facing prosecution for treason and war crimes after the country's Senate voted to lift his parliamentary immunity. The dramatic move clears the way for legal action against the former leader, who governed from 2001 to 2019. Kabila stands accused of supporting the M23 rebel group, which has seized several strategic areas in the mineral-rich eastern regions of Congo. The group is also believed to have received backing from neighboring Rwanda, escalating tensions in the already volatile region. Currently residing in South Africa, Kabila has denied all allegations, calling them politically motivated. In a strongly worded statement, he accused President Felix Tshisekedi's administration of authoritarianism and warned that the nation is slipping into dictatorship. The charges come amid increasing international pressure to stabilize the region. The United States, under President Donald Trump, is reportedly pushing for a peace deal that would include mining agreements aimed at drawing Western investment into the conflict-hit zones. The case marks an unprecedented moment in Congolese politics and could have far-reaching consequences for both national governance and regional security. Now let us turn our attention to the Middle East, Israel-Palestine. Conflict escalates as humanitarian crisis deepens. The Israel-Palestine conflict has entered a critical phase, with intensified military actions and growing humanitarian concerns, particularly in Gaza. Israeli airstrikes and civilian casualties. Israel has launched over 100 airstrikes on Gaza, targeting Hamas infrastructure. These strikes have resulted in at least 15 Palestinian deaths, many of whom were civilians, including families trapped in the rubble of collapsed buildings. The United Nations and World Health Organization have raised alarms over the severe humanitarian situation, citing limited access to aid and damage to medical infrastructure. Despite international criticism, Israel has denied accusations of using Palestinians as human shields, a practice prohibited under international law. Hostage crisis and protests in Israel. In Tel Aviv, thousands of demonstrators gathered outside. The Israeli Defense Ministry calling for the release of the 58 hostages still held by Hamas since the October 7, 2023 attacks. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reaffirmed Israel's resolve to disarm Hamas, while Hamas has stated it will only release hostages in exchange for an Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, the release of Palestinian prisoners, and a permanent ceasefire, conditions Netanyahu has rejected. Humanitarian aid and international response. Israel is reconsidering its policy on humanitarian aid to Gaza, potentially allowing the United Nations and other international organizations to manage medical and shelter supplies. However, food aid will still be controlled by the Israeli-approved Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which critics claim lacks transparency and the capacity to effectively address the growing crisis. Diplomatic push for peace. The United Nations General Assembly has approved a high-level conference set for June 2025 to discuss implementing a two-state solution for the Israel-Palestine conflict. With 157 nations voting in favor, the conference aims to pursue a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace agreement in the region. Now to global news. Global news. Highlights. Australia faces historic flooding, Myanmar earthquake recovery, China-Indonesia. Diplomacy and press freedom in Palestine. Australia faces historic flooding crisis. New South Wales is experiencing its worst flooding disaster in recorded history. A slow-moving low-pressure system has caused catastrophic flooding, especially along the mid-north coast and Hunter Valley. At least 5 people have died, and more than 50,000 people are cut off from essential services. Emergency crews have conducted over 177 rescues. Authorities are working to restore power, food supplies, and communication to affected communities. Myanmar earthquake recovery efforts continue. Myanmar is still reeling from the aftermath of a 6.2 magnitude earthquake that struck near Mandalay on April 23, 2025. The earthquake has caused significant damage and loss of life. Rescue efforts continue amidst ongoing aftershocks and the country's political instability, making the relief operation even more challenging. Aid is being provided to the affected areas. China and Indonesia strengthen diplomatic ties. Chinese Premier Li Qiang announced on May 24, 2025, that China and Indonesia will collaborate to promote true multilateralism. This move aims to bolster their diplomatic and economic relationship, emphasizing mutual respect and shared interests. The agreement is viewed as a strategic counter to growing Western influence in the region. Press freedom under siege. In Palestine, on World Press Freedom Day, attention was drawn to the dangers faced by journalists in Palestine, where over 140 journalists have been killed in Gaza since October 2023. Many other journalists face arbitrary arrests, harassment, and restrictions on movement. Despite these challenges, Palestinian media professionals continue to report, ensuring that the global community stays informed on the ongoing crisis.